process of getting formally diagnosed as autistic. I'm 26 and I've been struggling my whole effing life, and I've been thinking about the possibility that I might be autistic for the past couple of years now, ever since I watched Love on the Spectrum, which I know is problematic, but it was my first real, it was the first time I really saw autism as something I related to, because until that point I only I thought of it in very stereotypical ways that most people think of, that I had been taught, like, oh no, autism is mostly in boys, and I had this very stereotypical idea of what being autistic looked like. So I watched Love on the Spectrum. I was like, you know what, that looks a lot like me, especially the girls in the show. But I was traveling at the time. I didn't have like a home per se. Like, I was kind of backpacking across Europe with my partner, and so I was like, I might get diagnosed when I go back to the UK, which I did. I came back to the UK. We came back to the UK over a year and a half ago now, and I kind of put autism on the back burner. I've had other things to worry about. I've had to come to terms with my childhood trauma of being raised by abusive, narcissistic parents, and the damage that caused, and like cutting ties with toxic family, things like that. And I saw a lot of therapists. I've seen a total of at least, I think, 6 therapists over the last 8 years. And, I was told I have depression, anxiety, and then this year I was diagnosed with PTSD, or complex PTSD, by a NHS counselor therapist. Basically, I asked to talk to someone about what I called my social anxiety, which I've been struggling with my whole life. By the way, I have a tangle in my hand. It's like new obsession of mine ever since I found out about stim toys or fidget toys. I've had a mild hyperfixation on tangles. Anyways, so yeah, I came to her for my social anxiety, which I thought was what I had. And then she started asking questions, and she asked, like, have you ever been a victim of violence? And I was like, yeah, my dad was pretty violent. And then she immediately jumped onto, I'm not blaming her. She was great. She was probably the best therapist I've had. But she immediately jumped onto trauma. And she was like, oh, you probably have PTSD. Do you still want to focus on your social anxiety, or do you want to focus on PTSD? And then I was like, well, PTSD sounds like a more problematic issue, so I'll probably focus on that. And I did, and so I had like intensive CBT for 4 months, from January to, well, 4 months later. Also, I lost a very dear family member at the end of January, so I was really dealing with the grief and stuff, still am. So it was a mix of everything, and for a few months I really focused on trauma and how I thought it affected me. And I remember like raising concerns with my therapist saying, you know, I'm not sure I have PTSD. I can't really relate to the idea of flashbacks and like having nightmares of trauma and things like that, like feeling like I'm back there. Well, that's basically what flashbacks are. And she was like, you know, I'm a professional. I've been doing this for years. I see that you have PTSD, okay? So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna question it any longer. But you know, I was telling her, I've been telling people for years about certain things I'm dealing with. And I can tell nobody understood. And it was the same with her. I was telling her like about my difficulties with work, and I could tell she didn't really get it. So anyways, we focused on trauma, and you know, I do have some trauma because I was, you know, raised by pretty narcissistic parents, and I suspect my dad is undiagnosed autistic as well, and because he has a lot of autistic traits now looking back. But so I had a lot of trauma. I have a lot of trauma. But I always felt like, you know, trauma doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain everything I'm struggling with right now. Have been struggling with my whole life, you know. And I can't really relate to it completely. Like, I was a little confused. I thought, you know, it doesn't explain why I feel like I'm putting on a mask every time I talk to people. Like, I've been saying that for years. Long before I found out about autistic masking, I was telling people, my partner, my therapist, I was telling them I feel like I'm wearing a mask when I'm with people, even my own family. I can never be myself, blah, blah, blah. And I was like asking people, like, do you like feel like you're not yourself around other people? And they would be like, yeah, you know, we're all a little bit different around different people, which is like has nothing to do with autistic masking. It's like a neurotypical thing. And so I thought, yeah, I'm being dramatic. I'm making a big deal out of something that everyone deals with. And I feel like a lot of late diagnosed autistic people will relate to that feeling of just like, oh, I'm just bad at dealing with life, and thinking that everyone is struggling or dealing with the same things. They're just better at it than you are, you know? I have felt that my whole life. And I've always felt like I had something missing, right? I felt like I had absolutely no social skills. I felt like I had been born without being given an instruction manual that everybody else got, if that makes sense. Like, I was always telling people, like, I feel like, you know, I'm missing some skills that was, like, I was basically describing autism without knowing what it was. And I was really struggling with masking. And even, you know, when I came to terms with my trauma and my past, my childhood, my abusive parents, it was great. I thought, you know, this is it. This explains all my problems. But it didn't. And I was left feeling really confused about why is it so freaking hard for me to interact with other human beings. Why is it so exhausting? Why does it feel like the hardest thing in the world, and then I need super long to recover from it? And I don't even remember what happened that reminded me of autism, but basically I started looking into it more over the past few weeks, and it just clicked. I mean, it didn't instantly click because I feel like it's a little tricky because, first of all, there's the stereotypical autistic traits that is often listed on official websites and things like that. And then there's the fact that it's a spectrum and everyone experiences it differently. And my brain is like, if you don't have every single trait exactly as they are defined here, then you don't have it, which is dumb, I know. I've had to, like, that's my rigid thinking. I very much have the black and white rigid thinking thing. I've been told my last therapist that I had black and white thinking, and now I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, so it's been overall, it's been a really positive journey because I feel like I finally have answers for all the struggles I've had in my life. And yeah, I'm like 99% sure I have autism. Even like thinking about my childhood, like it seems pretty obvious to me now looking back. And obviously I was assigned female at birth, so I think people never considered it might be a possibility. And you know, I was a good student, quiet for the most part. People just thought I was shy, mature for my age, things like that. You know, and also I grew up in a pretty remote rural area of France, which is where I'm from, hence the accent. And you know, I don't want to be mean, but most of the adults in my life back when I was, you know, living in France were pretty bad at their job, to put it simply. You know, I had teachers who were absolute bullies, who humiliated me publicly, who were absolutely useless. And then, you know, my family doctor, when I came to him when I was 18 and I was having a nervous breakdown, I think I was just having autistic burnout, and he was like, oh, do you have any hobbies? And I was like, yeah, I'm learning to play the violin right now, which was a special interest of me at the time, hyperfixation. It was like, oh, then if you have hobbies, then you're not depressed, because if you were depressed, you wouldn't be doing anything, which is just stupid. And he was like, you're too young to get antidepressants, so I'm gonna give you St. John's wort and refer you to a therapist, which was my first experience with a therapist. And then the therapist told me, you know, from what you're telling me, I think you were a pretty precocious child, or like gifted. And so, yeah, I wasn't surrounded by people who were very good at their job, let's say that. And a lot of things were overlooked. And also, like I said, I grew up in a very abusive family, pretty abusive. So, no compassion, no support. It was all about my parents, and if I was different in any way, it was wrong, and I had to be like them, kind of thing. So even when I displayed like very obvious signs that there was something going on, like I had really big behavioral issues, and they were told that I should be taken to a child psychologist. They didn't. I don't know if they were scared that they might be judged as bad parents, or they thought that maybe if I talked to a therapist, a psychologist, I might accidentally reveal that I was being mistreated. I don't know what it was, but I never received the help and support that I needed. So yeah, I was just surrounded by a bunch of hypocritical, incompetent adults who only cared about themselves. Anyways, that's me just expressing my frustration and anger, but that's pretty much why I wasn't diagnosed earlier. And also, like 80% of autistic women, or people assigned female at birth, aren't diagnosed by the age of 18. So that makes sense. And yeah, the last few weeks I've been living and breathing autism. It's been my latest hyperfixation. I can't think about anything else. I can't do anything else. I can't talk about anything else, which is really annoying for the people around me. But anyways, I've always been like that, which is definitely an autistic trait. But I've been deep diving into it, joining all the subreddits that I could find and watching all the videos from a lot of different autistic content creators. And one of my favorite has been the Thought Spot with Irene. We're very different, but I could relate to a lot of things she said. And yeah, I've been figuring myself out over the past few weeks, putting the pieces of the puzzle back together, which might not be the best metaphor because the puzzle symbol of autism is problematic, but yeah, I've been figuring myself out, and a lot of things make sense looking at them through the lens of autism. I've always struggled socially. I've always masked. The only person I don't mask around is my partner, and he has ADHD and possibly autism as well, because I just see a lot of myself in him, and it would make sense because I've just felt so comfortable around him. Like, we are the same, we function the same way, so it would make sense. Like, he's the only person I've been completely comfortable around, and that I'm able to be myself around. So everybody else in my life I have masked with when I was around them, including my own family, friends, my in-laws. I've always struggled making friends, especially as an adult. I don't really know how to navigate relationships. Like, I get pretty confused. I don't know what people think of me. I don't know if I did or said the right thing a lot of the time. I end up being very awkward because I'm always scared of like accidentally hurting someone, because that's happened in the past, or just doing something that's inappropriate and weird and that will freak people out. So I will agonize over text messages for hours thinking, is it weird saying that? Am I talking too much about myself? Should I ask this question, or is it too intrusive? Should I? So I would say I'm pretty socially isolated in my life. I mean, I live with my partner and our 2 cats. We both work from home. Well, I'm not working currently, but he works from home, and we don't have any friends. And we're mostly fine with that. I mean, I do feel a little lonely sometimes, but I'd rather be lonely and be in my own little bubble and do things my way than having to socialize, which sounds really sad, but I'm fine with it for the most part. So that's one thing, like I've struggled with socializing my whole life. I have, like I said, I have this very black and white way of thinking. Like, people in relationships in my head are either perfect or completely toxic. I really struggle to see the nuance and the gray area. I struggle with like literal thinking and like not understanding sarcasm and teasing and things like that, which is why I have such a difficult time with my father-in-law, my partner's stepdad, because his way of communicating involves a lot of play fighting and teasing. And even though most of the time I know he's joking, it just doesn't register in my head, and I take it very personally. And I just don't know how to react, and it's weird. For example, like he likes, when we're playing games, he likes to say like, "Oh, you're such a cheat," and I'm like, I take it very literally because I'm a very honest person. I can't lie. I take pride in my honesty, that people can count on me to speak the truth. And I'm like incapable of being hypocritical, if you will. Like, if I don't like you, you'll know pretty quickly. So I get so offended when he says that I'm a cheat. Even though he's joking, I still get offended. Anyways, I don't get jokes most of the time, so I just laugh because everybody else is laughing, and then I'm like, I might get it like a day later, I don't know. So that's another thing. Also, like, I've had really strong special interests and hyperfixations my whole life. When I was 10, I was obsessed with snails. I had several snails as pets that I would take with me everywhere I went, in a Tupperware box with holes in it and little leaves of salad and such. I would talk about them all the time, to the point where my dentist would always ask about them every time I went there. I wrote a freaking book about snails based on my own observations and the research I did online. I still have that book. And then I thought I might get it published, like little 10-year-old me. I built my own website. So that was back in like 2007, you know? The internet wasn't what it is today. I built my own little website where I wanted to sell snail eggs and like snails for breeding and things like that. I've always been obsessed with animals and breeding in general, not in a weird way, like just like genetics and you know, reproduction, things like that always fascinated me. And then I actually successfully bred some snails. I got like eggs and stuff that I ate with my family, because it was like, at the time it was a very trendy delicacy and it was very expensive. It was like the new caviar. And I did all that, and I even got some people interested in buying my snails and my snail eggs, like from my website. So that was a whole thing. And I've had like a special interest in Harry Potter ever since I saw the first movie in the cinema when I was 4. No, yeah, 4. I've been obsessed with Harry Potter ever since. Even when I'm not actively engaging in something related to Harry Potter, in my head, a lot of the time, especially when I'm in a stressful or overwhelming situation and I need some kind of comfort, mentally I'll go back to Hogwarts, you know what I mean? And I've been doing that my whole life. I did a lot of like maladaptive daydreaming as a child because the world was just too much for me. So I would just retreat into my own world in my head and imagined that I was a dragon rider or a horse or a dog or yeah. So very strong special interests my whole life, to an extreme level sometimes, of like not being able to think about anything else, do anything else, talk about anything else, which is the case right now with autism. And before that, it was like gender identity that I've been fascinated by for the past 10 years or so, ever since I was a teenager. Also, I have realized that I stim a lot, in mostly covert ways. I've been picking the skin on my thumbs my whole life, for as long as I can remember. I don't know if you can tell. Periodically, it will come and go depending on my stress levels. I have had periods where I would bite my nails. I bite the inside of my lower lip. I bounce my leg. I crack my knuckles. I will have periods of like hard blinking and scrunching up my nose, things like that. I often get the urge to rock, which I have suppressed my whole life, and now I'm learning to not suppress it anymore. Or like any kind of whole body movement, of like any kind of swaying, rocking, bouncing of any kind, like even like clenching my muscles, just and I have vocal stims as well, making little noises, or echolalia. I have this vocal stim that I've had for years, of like, I don't know how you say that in English, but like musical scales. So like, I'm not very good at singing, but I'll do like la 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 la. That was embarrassing. And I'll do that several times, like going up and down, and just, it's a very relaxing stim for me. Anyways, so I do a lot of stimming, and ever since I started being more, self-conscious, I've realized that I'm constantly stimming. Like, it's not that like the occasional little stim that neurotypicals do. I stim all the time. And wiggling my toes is a big one, because you can't see it. It's perfect. I will do more covert stims when it's not socially acceptable to stim in a bigger way. I have visual stims as well, auditory stims. For example, I've realized that I've been addicted to ASMR for 10 years, maybe, and I listen to it every day. It's definitely auditory stim for me. Also, I have trouble with eye contact. Eye contact is freaking uncomfortable, and I do it in such an unnatural way that people must have noticed, because I've been masking my whole life, but I think I'm not very good at masking. I can tell. Sometimes I just can't, and then people are really uncomfortable around me sometimes. So my partner, for example, whom we suspect might be autistic as well, is much better at masking than I am. In other words, he's much better at making neurotypicals feel comfortable around him than I am. And one thing I struggle with is eye contact. So I will force myself to look into someone's eyes when communicating with them, and then I will look at them so intensely, and then I'll be like, okay, no, now I think it's okay if you look away, and then I'll look away, and then like I'll basically use any opportunity to look away from their eyes. Also, I took eye contact very literally and thought it was like staring into someone's eyes, when in fact eye contact is more like generally looking into someone's face, it can be their mouth, whatever. So I struggled with eye contact, and I always felt a lot more comfortable talking to people while we're walking side by side or sitting next to each other in the car and both looking at the road, or sitting on the couch looking at the TV, or in darkness, and now I know why. I'm very uncomfortable talking to someone face to face or on the phone, because there's no like face to face. So that's one thing. What else? Sensory sensitivities. I do have some. I feel like I'm more sensory seeking than I am sensory avoidant, which I'm very happy about, because it can be really debilitating. But I still have like, I'm still sensory avoidant in certain contexts. Like, I don't like bright lights. My eyes get very tired. Actually, I was misdiagnosed with having astigmatism, I think it's called, as a child, when in fact I was just, my eyes were getting tired from bright screens and things like that, which is a fun discovery I've made. So I hate any kind of like bright, white, cold, like ceiling lights. I only like dim, warm, mood lighting, candles, fairy lights, little ambient lighting. I'm very sensitive to loud noises as well. I will sometimes cover my ears when my partner is hoovering, or if there's like a lot of clattering of dishes and cutlery in the kitchen, loud music, loud voices, all of that. So I actually purchased, well, yeah, goes online. My partner and I just purchased some loop earplugs, because he also has sensory sensitivities, actually I think more than I do, potentially from his ADHD, maybe from being autistic, we're not sure yet, but we both got these and they're great. We've only used them yesterday, but they're great, and I think they're gonna come in handy to avoid getting too overstimulated when we're out and about. I'm very sensitive to smells as well. Like if someone is like walking past me on the street, and they have like I'll notice their perfume, and a lot of the time perfumes are way too strong for me. I can't wear perfume much because it gives me nausea or like headaches, and like walking through the perfume aisle in shopping malls and airports is like a sensory nightmare. Or is it just me? I've always hated it. Now I know why. But I'm also very sensory seeking. I love flavorful, textured food, although I can't stand runny egg whites. I just have to scrape them off, and as a kid I couldn't stand eating like the grease in meat. Now I'm a vegetarian, so I don't have that problem anymore. There's a lot of vegetables I don't eat as well. But overall, I wouldn't consider myself a picky eater. I'm a foodie. Also, like, I'm very sensory seeking when it comes to like touch, so I love touching things and playing with things, fidgeting. I'm not too sensory avoidant when it comes to touch. There's a few things, like I can't stand wet hair or wet clothing touching my skin. I'll have like a whole ritual when I wash my hair to avoid it touching my skin. But other than that, and like light, when someone touches me, most of the time it's like uncomfortable. But other than that, like I'm okay with most textures. Some fabrics definitely make my skin itchy. I've had sensitive skin for as long as I can remember. Also, I have like routines and little rituals, and I like to be in control of my environment. I'm really stressed out when there's like sudden changes, unexpected things, or big life changes like having to move. And all of these traits that I've described, I've had for as long as I can remember. Like even as a toddler, my mom told me I would watch the 101 Dalmatians, the Disney movie, every single day for months, which now looking back is a very autistic thing to do. So yeah, I've always been like that. It's not like I've really looked into the possibility that it might be trauma related, but I just can't. There are a lot of things that trauma doesn't explain. I definitely have trauma as well, but it doesn't explain everything. Anyways, this video ended up being very long, as I suspected, but it was a good way, I think, to document where I'm at in my journey. And I'm seeking formal diagnosis right now. It's the 14th of December today, and I have an appointment with a psychiatrist on the 13th of January, so a month from now. And hopefully things go smoothly from here and I can get my formal diagnosis and maybe get some help and support, because I am unable to work or have any kind of social life, and I struggle with my mental health. So I've been on antidepressants for the past 4 months, sertraline, and it's done nothing for me. If anything, it's made my symptoms worse. So I'm coming off it gradually now. Just had an appointment with my GP this morning over the phone to discuss it. So yeah, I've been speaking too much now and oversharing, which I often do. Anyways, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this video, but if anything, I can look back in a few years and be like, oh, that's where I was in my journey. I've come a long way now. Anyways, bye.